January 5, 1943. A U.S. Navy cruiser floats in the waters off Guadalcanal. The crew has just finished bombarding Japanese positions. They're exhausted, on edge. Then, 4 enemy dive bombers appear on the horizon. The alarm sounds, battle stations. The Japanese planes strike, then climb away, thinking they've escaped. They're over 4 miles out, beyond the range of American guns. Or so they thought. What happens next shouldn't be possible. The USS Helena's guns open fire. Not hundreds of rounds, just a few shells. The crew watches. The shells streak toward the distant aircraft. Then, without hitting them directly, the shells explode. One bomber erupts in flames, tumbles into the ocean. Another follows. The gun crews stare in disbelief. They just shot down enemy aircraft at extreme range, without actually hitting them. The shells knew when to detonate. No timing calculations, no guesswork, no frantic adjustments. The weapons simply knew. What those sailors had just used was a secret so closely guarded, it ranked second only to the atomic bomb in security classification. A weapon so revolutionary that military leaders feared its capture more than almost any other technology. A device that would prove 3 to 4 times more effective than conventional ammunition. Yet, despite its incredible potential to save American lives, the highest levels of military command would refuse to authorize its widespread use for nearly 2 years. This is the story of the proximity fuse. Before 1943, shooting down an aircraft was an exercise in deadly futility. The statistics were grim. 20,000 rounds to shoot down one enemy aircraft. Some estimates, 100,000 rounds per kill. Ships returned to port with their magazines depleted. Enemy aircraft still dominated the skies. American sailors died because their anti-aircraft guns simply couldn't stop attacking aircraft. The problem was simple. The sky is enormous. Aircraft are small. They move at high speeds in 3 dimensions. And once an artillery shell is fired, it follows a predetermined path that cannot be altered. Traditional shells required direct hits or perfect timing calculations accounting for altitude, speed, direction, wind, trajectory. Any error, even by a fraction of a second, the shell explodes harmlessly in empty air. Everyone knew there had to be a better solution. The British had begun research. The Germans initiated between 30 and 50 different proximity fuse programs. The Japanese experimented with acoustic detection. But there was a problem. The technical obstacles seemed insurmountable. Imagine this. You need to fit a miniature radar system inside an artillery shell only 5 inches in diameter. That system needs to survive acceleration forces of 20,000 times gravity when fired. The shell spins at 25,000 revolutions per minute. It needs to work in rain, snow, humidity, Arctic cold, and the chaos of combat. And it needs to be cheap enough to manufacture by the millions. Vacuum tubes, the building blocks of all electronics in that era, were delicate glass containers that shattered under far less stress. Batteries were too large. Radar antennas were massive installations weighing tons. Most experts considered it impossible. September 1940. Britain stands alone against Nazi Germany. Sir Henry Tizard arrives in Washington carrying a black metal box containing Britain's most closely guarded secrets. Among them, preliminary designs for a proximity fuse. But British scientists admit they lack the industrial capacity to make it real. The challenge falls to American researchers. Dr. Merle Tuve at Johns Hopkins University. Security classification, second only to the atomic bomb. Workers in factories had no idea what they were building. The code name? Variable time, abbreviated VT, to hide its true nature. Crisis after crisis. Standard vacuum tubes shattered instantly. In one test, engineers recovered only glass powder and twisted wire. They tried everything. Wax, it melted. Oil, it leaked. Rubber, it deteriorated. Plastics, they cracked. One engineer even suggested using human blood plasma as a cushioning medium. 900 consecutive tubes destroyed, not a single success. Then, a breakthrough. They found a specific combination. Tubes mounted at 30 degrees, cushioned in a mixture of wax and oil. 70% survival rate. Good enough for war. But the battery problem remained. The solution? Elegant, counterintuitive. They created a tiny glass ampule containing liquid electrolyte. When the gun fired, the massive acceleration shattered the glass. The shell's spin drove the liquid outward to contact metal plates. The battery activated itself, using the very forces that threatened to destroy it. August 12, 1942, USS Cleveland, Chesapeake Bay. Radio-controlled drone aircraft serve as targets. The results? They exceeded all expectations. 3 drones destroyed. 4 bursts. First day. The test was so successful, the Navy canceled the second day and immediately ordered mass production. But here's where it gets interesting. The Navy could use it. Over deep water only, where duds would sink beyond enemy reach. But the Army? In Europe? Forbidden. Army commanders knew it existed. They knew it could save their soldiers' lives. General Eisenhower had seen the statistics, and they were refused permission to use it. The Pentagon's logic? If the Germans captured even one intact fuse and reverse-engineered it, German anti-aircraft guns would become 3 to 4 times more effective. The strategic bombing campaign over Europe would be lost. Better to maintain strict security than risk that scenario. So American soldiers died, while a weapon that could save them sat in warehouses. Throughout 1943, the Navy devastated Japanese air power. During that year, naval guns fired over 36,000 anti-aircraft rounds. Only 25% used proximity fuses, but those shells accounted for 51% of all aircraft destroyed. Time-fused shells, 508 rounds per kill. Proximity-fused shells, 155 rounds per kill. More than 3 times as effective. At night, 370% increase in kill ratios. Japanese pilots who used darkness as protection suddenly found themselves just as vulnerable as in daylight. December 16, 1944, 5:30 a.m., the Ardennes Forest. 250,000 German soldiers, 500 tanks, 2,000 artillery pieces. Operation Watch on the Rhine, the Battle of the Bulge. The surprise was complete. American forces reeled backward in confusion. German infantry advanced with confidence. American artillery, while dangerous, wasn't the precision killer it could have been. 3 days into the offensive, with American forces in crisis, Eisenhower had seen enough. He sent an urgent message to the Pentagon. The strategic situation overrode security concerns. If the Germans broke through to Antwerp, the entire campaign would collapse. The risk of captured fuses was less than the risk of losing the campaign. December 21, 1944. All restrictions removed. Within hours, 200,000 shells rushed to the front lines. The results were immediate. Shells exploded perfectly at treetop height. Every round detonated at optimal height. Maximum fragment spread. German soldiers advancing across snow-covered fields found themselves in kill zones with no protection. December 23rd, near Echternach, Luxembourg. A German battalion attempts to cross the Sauer River. Patton's artillery catches them in the open. 702 enemy soldiers killed by actual body count. The battalion ceased to exist. Patton wrote, "The new shell with the funny fuse is devastating. When all armies get this shell, we will have to devise some new method of warfare." German prisoners described complete helplessness. There was simply no defense. They exploded overhead with no warning. Men in foxholes and trenches died as steel fragments came from above. The 8th Infantry Division caught a German patrol. Time-on-target barrage with proximity fuses. 96 Germans found dead. Complete annihilation. Not a single survivor. German offensive momentum ground to a halt by December 25th. The counteroffensive that was supposed to win breathing space for Germany became a catastrophic defeat. October 25th, 1944. Battle of Leyte Gulf. The first organized kamikaze attack. Lieutenant Yukio Seki leads 5-0 against American escort carriers. One kamikaze crashes into USS St. Lo. The ship explodes. Sinks within 30 minutes. 143 dead. This wasn't warfare, as Americans understood it. Pilots who accepted death at the outset couldn't be deterred. But proximity fuses proved uniquely effective. Why? Kamikaze pilots flew predictable, straight-line trajectories. No evasion, no pulling away. 5-inch guns with VT ammunition. 310 rounds per kill against kamikazes. Against conventional attacks, 624 rounds per kill. April to June 1945. The ultimate test. Nearly 2,000 kamikaze sorties. 10 major attack waves. 26 ships sunk. 164 damaged. Nearly 5,000 sailors dead. But without proximity fuses, the losses would have been catastrophic rather than merely severe. Nearly 2/3 of all VT fuses expended during the entire war were used in just 7.5 months of 1945. Most of them around Okinawa. Those fuses shot down over 1,200 Japanese aircraft that otherwise might have crashed into American ships. By war's end, American industry had produced 22 million proximity fuses, $1 billion in 1940s currency. Early hand-assembled fuses, $732 each, more expensive than many automobiles. By 1945, assembly line production reduced the cost to $18, a 40-fold reduction, and at $18 each, they were cost-effective when their dramatically improved kill rates were considered. Despite millions fired in combat, the Axis powers never successfully reverse-engineered the technology. German engineers captured some duds in late 1944, but they couldn't believe the fuses actually worked as advertised. Functional radio equipment surviving inside an artillery shell seemed so improbable. They assumed it was an elaborate deception. The Japanese understood the principle, but their electronics industry lacked the capability to replicate the extreme miniaturization required. The gap had grown too wide. Secretary of the Navy James Forrestal. It helped blaze the trail to Japan. General Eisenhower. If the Germans had perfected this 6 months earlier than we did, the invasion of Europe would have proven exceedingly difficult, perhaps impossible. These weren't casual observations. These were strategic assessments from men who understood the narrow margins that separated victory from defeat. The lesson? 1530. For nearly 2 years, Army commanders were denied access to this war-winning weapon. The Pentagon's security concerns were legitimate, but the decision prioritized theoretical future threats over immediate present casualties. Only when the situation became desperate during the Battle of the Bulge did leadership approve what should have been authorized months earlier. Innovation delayed, costs lives. But when finally unleashed, revolutionary technology can change the course of history itself. Every modern anti-aircraft missile uses proximity fusing as standard equipment. The Patriot missiles that defended against Scuds in the Gulf War, proximity fuses descended directly from the Mark 32. Naval close-in weapon systems, fighter aircraft missiles, all modern air defense. The technology pioneered under desperate wartime conditions became fundamental to how we defend ourselves today. Naval historians estimate that without proximity fuses, American casualties in the Pacific would have been 30 to 50% higher. The kamikaze threat might have forced cancellation of the Okinawa invasion. The invasion of Japan itself might have faced insurmountable losses. In Europe, the Battle of the Bulge might have succeeded without proximity-fused artillery. London might have been evacuated under sustained V-1 bombardment. The war might have continued into 1946 or 1947 with millions more casualties. 22 million tiny radars, each no larger than an ice cream cone. They helped win the largest war in human history. They did so by solving a problem that seemed impossible, turning the vast empty sky into a killing field for enemy aircraft, and giving Allied forces the edge they needed, when they needed it most. The sailors aboard Helena, who fired those first combat shots in January 1943, couldn't have known they were inaugurating a new era in warfare. They simply knew their shells were hitting targets that should have been impossible to engage. But warfare had entered a new phase, where technological sophistication mattered as much as courage and numbers. And sometimes, the most important victories come not from courage alone, though courage is essential, but from the marriage of scientific innovation and industrial might. The proximity fuse, the secret weapon the Navy kept to itself. The innovation Pentagon leaders feared to deploy, the weapon that helped save the Allied cause when it mattered most. If you want to hear more incredible stories of World War II technology that changed history, hit that subscribe button. Next time, we're diving into Operation Mincemeat, the elaborate deception that fooled Hitler himself.